on writing anything about, on tribe. But nevertheless, given a bit of my experience, on research in tribes, I thought I could share some thoughts or also in the form of reflections. So once again, Vikas, thank you so much for your generous introductions. And what we can do today is assess it rather than making it a two-way, no, sorry, making it a one-way traffic. It would be great if we can have interactions, or I may even provoke you to some extent, and so that we can share on the one ways and also clarify some of your doubts or say in terms of researching tribes in the context of India. So here to begin with, and I must also acknowledge that I am not an expert on tribal studies, but my interest is on tribal studies in the context of India, nevertheless. And of course, I teach sociology here in IIT Bombay. But to begin with, I kind of divide my sharing today into two parts. The first part is to deal with the very concept, the very category tribes in India. How did it evolve? What are the processes? What are the criteria to be called as a scheduled tribe in the context of India? And the second part is to do on how do we approach researching tribes in the context of India, and more specifically on how do we write up our processes in terms of tribes in India. And I'm sure all of you have been aware of tribe or the very category tribe. But to begin with, let us try and historicize a bit in terms of the category tribes. How did the category tribes came to a being in the context of Indian society? Say theoretically, if we look at it, beginning from 1881, the concept of like said what we today call scheduled tribe is being named as forest tribes, and as such, that forest tribe as a subcategory under the agriculture and pastoral castes. In fact, if we look at historically, that was the first instance in the context of India in 1881, wherein there is a subcategory under agriculture and pastoral caste called as forest tribes. And fast forward to 1901 and 1911. This it was called as what is called so-called animist and practice animism. So if we look into the census of 1901 and 1911, what we today call scheduled tribe is being called as what is called animist and practice animisms. And if we go again fast forward to 1921, there was some category which was inserted called tribal religion, hill and forest tribes in 1921 census. And the category primitive tribe was added in 1931 census. So if we look at the very category, again, for instance, in 1935, there was this concept called backward tribes. And again, in 1941, this tribal origin instead of religions was replaced. So one of the landmark in the context of the very category of scheduled tribe is what was called in 1950 what is called the constitutional amendment order of scheduled tribe in 1950. I'll come to detail a little later in that. But why I am bringing this up is to have some backdrop understanding the very category tribes. So some of the important acts that has a ramifications, that have implications, that we today research or what's called the category scheduled tribe. I wanted to pinpoint some of the important act. For instance, the Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation Act 1873. Why am I talking this? The Bengal Frontier Regulation Act 1873, it has till today some sort of a ramification in the form of what is called the inner line permit, particularly in some of the northeastern states. So inner line permit in the state of Mizoram, Nagaland, and Arunachal Pradesh. it was during this time when the British brought in this egg in 1873 to demarcate the line or to draw a line, certain line wherein certain people cannot go or need to take a permissions to go beyond that point of line. So it was the Britishers who drew that line. Until today, there is a ramification or implication in the form of inner line permit. And coming back to this again, the Scheduled Areas Act of 1874. That is history in landmark in itself. Because it was in this Scheduled Areas Act 1874, the concept of geographical inhabitants to be scheduled areas was introduced for the first time. Again, the Government of India Act 1919 captures something quite interesting and unique. So it gave birth to the concept what is called the backward track. So for instance, in this Government of India Act 1919 talks about where the right as the Governor General in Council may declare any territory in British India to be a backward tract and may by notification with such sanctions as aforementioned. Why I am bringing this is that I am going to discuss this in the context of the Constitution Amendment Act 1950. So it was in this Government of India Act 1919 that introduced the concepts of backward tracks. Again, the Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 produced some unique concept, which is called excluded area and partially excluded areas. So, for instance, the Government of India Act 1935 pointed out that in this act, the expression excluded areas and partially excluded area mean respectively such areas as His Majesty may, by order in council, declare to be in excluded areas. And notwithstanding anything in this act, no act of the federal legislature or of the provincial legislature shall apply to an excluded area or partially excluded area unless the governor ratified all this matter. And one of the implication of this in today's context that we have in the constitution what is called fifth schedule and sixth schedule. So the state like Nagaland, some of the acts passed in the parliament pertaining to about the culture and tradition is not applicable in the context of the state of Nagaland. And when we look at history, some part of this, what we today call Nagaland state, was comes under what is called excluded areas during the British periods. So there are certain territories which predominantly inhabited by the tribes in the context of India, and which comes under either scheduled area, partially excluded area or an excluded areas. So in those excluded or partially excluded areas, the context is that until and unless the discretionary of the governor as such, the such act will be made applicable in those territories. And here the question is that we as a scholar, how do we research on under those kind of circumstances? That's the reason I was trying to bring about history side. For instance, the Eastern Bengal Frontier Regulation Act of 1873, the Scheduled Area Act of 1874, the Government of India Act 1919, and the Government of India Act 1935. So that's are the kind of the backdrop in before India got independence. And in terms of the theoretical debate that is taking place before India got independence, is like two very important debate, what is called Alvin Guray's debate in the context of tribal studies. In the sense that the tribal question, what do we do with this concept or with tribes? There was this interesting debate taking place between Professor Verret Elvin and Professor G.S. Gure. So the kind of debate in these aspects was that Alvin is in favor of what he called the isolations of tribes to protect their interest. In the sense that let tribes be themselves, let tribes be protected, let them be isolated so that their interests, their culture, their traditions can be taken care. On the other hand, Professor J.S. Gure asserted what is called assimilations approach, in the sense that let tribes be assimilated to the larger society. The gradual assimilation of tribes into Hindu fold. That was the debate taking place between G.S. Gure and Alvin, and there are enormous kind of work being documented or being written by both Professor G.S. Gure and Alvin in this particular domains. But what is important is in terms of when India got independence and what does the constitutions state about in terms of the very questions of tribes. So here, the Constitution of India did not really spell out what is called the integration, but it followed what is called the integrations process. Neither that of isolation nor that of an assimilation, but it is the constitution that brings in the concepts of integration in terms of nation building, full integration with some degree of autonomy to certain tribal areas, tribal areas. For instance, the Constitution of India spells out about what is called the sixth schedule, the fifth schedule, and the statutory recognition was given in Article 342, and also Article 370 and Article 330. Article 330. Sorry, my mistake. Article 330 and Article 332, which gives about the proportional representation. Not only that, as I say, the fifth and sixth schedule, which talks about safeguarding, protecting, and promoting the interests of the tribal people. So I don't have to literally go into the constitutional definition of scheduled tribe to read that, but you are all, I'm sure you're all aware. What does the Article 342 talks about in the context of the tribes and Article 366? So here, I wanted to highlight a bit in terms of some of the significance, some of the acts that passed in the context of like post in the independent. The first, what is called the scheduled tribe list, which is called the Constitution Schedule Order 1950, remain what is called the principal list of who are the scheduled tribe, which are the community that comes into the scheduled tribe. And this Constitution Scheduled Tribe Order 1950, in fact, was taken more into what is called the the Government of India Act 1935, what is called the backward track or the backward class list. So coming to that aspect again, there was also a constitution scheduled tribe which concern about the part 3 state, which is called as the Constitution Scheduled Tribe Part C States Order 1951. And come again, the Constitution Scheduled Tribe, those coming under what is called the Union Territories Order 1951. So these are in additions to what is called the Constitution Scheduled Tribe Order 1950. For instance, the Constitutional Scheduled Tribe Part C States Order 1951 deals with those territories inhabited by the tribes in the context of India, which comes under the Part C state. And similarly, the Constitution's Scheduled Tribe Union Territories Order is concerning about those community that comes under Union Territory in 1950. So coming to that aspect, again, in the Constitution Scheduled Tribe Order Amendment Act 1956. Similarly, in 1976, there was this the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Order Amendment 1976. And say, for instance, the latest kind of amendment is the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Order Amendment Act 2002. Why am I saying all this bringing up is that for us to equip ourselves in terms of the historicity and all these constitutional order or the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe order, it has in relations to what is called tracing the criteria who can become a scheduled tribe. So there is a very interesting paper published by Body in 2023 on becoming scheduled tribes. In this context, we need to also keep in mind about the evolutions and the development of the criteria to be listed as scheduled tribes in the context of India. As I said, the Scheduled Districts Act 1874, wherein the concepts of the scheduled district was given birth. And the Government of India Act 1919 gave birth to what is called the backward tracts. And the census of 1931 gave to the concept what is called the primitive tribes. And the Government of India Act 1935 gave what is called the concept backward tribes was given. So the first report of the commissioner, what is called the National Commission for Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribe 1952, it gives the idea of the primitive way of living, habitations in remote and less easily accessible area, nomadic habits, and love for drinks and dance. That was what was the report of the first commissioner, or what is called the National Commission for Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe in 1952. And in 1953-54, we have what is called the Backward Class Commission, the Kaka Calicut Commissions. In these commissions, one, the criteria which was given is that their tribes live apart in hills, and even where they live in plain, they live separate, excluded existence, and are not fully assimilated in the man body of the people. ST may belong to any religion. That was the report, the crux of the reports of the Kaka Calicut Commission's report 1953-1955. Then we have in 1960-61, we have what is called the Debar Commission report on scheduled areas and the ST commissions. Here it brings up what is called the underdeveloped and marked economic disparity. And most interestingly, the Lughur Commission report 1965, it gives the indications of what is called the primitive traits, distinctive culture, geographically isolated, shyness of contact with community at large, backwardness. And a very important point which we often miss in this Lughur Commission report is such that tribe whose members have by and large mix up with general population are not eligible to be in the list of scheduled tribes. And interestingly, the Chandan Committee 1969 and the report of the Joint Parliamentary Committee on Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Order Amendment Bill established what is called the criteria of Lughur Committee. So if we look at historically and tracing about it, there are three sets of criteria for to become a scheduled tribes in the context of India. One is that of what is called the Constitution 1950. The other one is the Lughur Committee 1965, or what is called the Chandan Committee report of the Joint Parliamentary of 1969. And interestingly, there is also what is called the Verifications Committee that is post 1997. So what does this verification committee talks about it in the sense that to appoint a committee, to appoint an expert to study about this, who can become a scheduled tribes. So for instance, The verification committee, there's some of the criteria which takes into account by the verification committees as a bounded to a territory, has land documents within the scheduled areas and distinct tribal habitats, and the cultural and customary practices, gods and goddesses, clan and clan totems, rituals in birth and dead, and including burial practices, looks about of the food habits, looking about the dialect and languages, talks about the noun hierarchical structure in the tribe, complete lack of like what is called the social stratification, except gender and age. Also, in terms of the surname, in terms of the autonomous economic system, subsistence economy, not interdependent occupations like sort of the caste based. So there are some of the verification, some of the points which takes into consideration what is called the verification committee post 1977. So, given this type of the background, the kind of the historicity, how do we locate tribal studies, or how do we research in terms of the tribal epistemology? And here, when I discuss about the epistemologies as such, the view on what constitute acceptable knowledge, what is the relationship between researcher and that being researched, I as a researcher, you as a researcher, what is your relations with the one which you are researching? For instance, here we're talking about in the context of the tribes, what is, what constitute, or what is the relationship between you as a researcher and that being researched? Here we are discussing about the epistemology, the view on what constitute epistemology. How did I come to know that what I claim to know? How did I come to know that there are three sets of criteria for scheduled tribes in the context of India? How did I come to know about, say, for instance, the Scheduled District Act 1874? It is through research, through this archival documentation, that I came to know that there was certain things called, the Scheduled District Act. I'm taking the example of that aspect. So researching on tribal areas or on the tribal culture, on the tribal traditions, we need to ask these questions. So when we talk about epistemology, we are discussing about the propositions. We're discussing about the beliefs. We're discussing about justification, ability knowledge, procedural knowledge, propositional knowledge, interrogative knowledge, perception, memory, reason, consciousness, testimony, doubt, certainties, realities, anti-realities, meta logos and logos. That is the aspects which we are getting into it, and in terms of the epistemology. But can epistemology exist independently without that of ontology? That's become again a very interesting concept. What is this then on the ontology? What exists? What is your positions on the essential nature of reality? What is the nature of the reality you are researching? What is the nature of the tribal reality which you are researching in? And what are the characteristics of this ontology? Again, we discuss about the complexities, dynamics, relationship, cause and effects, dialectics. You talks about similarities. You talks about differences, variations, diversity, trends, patterns, systems. What are the structures? The rules, the roles. What are the reinforcement, discourse, meaning? And when we discuss about this ontology, we are bringing about all those characteristics. So there is this relation between ontology, epistemology, and most importantly, we are discussing about what value are we bringing up when we research, say, on the context of tribes in the context in India. Are we writing up the research paper? Are we researching for power? Or are we researching to bring in about the empowerment of the tribal communities, for instance? And here we are dealing with this concepts of axiology, what is called the role of personal values and moral in social conduct, and the researcher's stance. What ethical and aesthetical positions you embed in your research. And some of the characteristics of axiology is the value, word, wordiness, ethics, consequentialis, in terms of research in that very domain. So here, ontology, epistemology, and axiologies are all interrelated in terms of researchings. So that is one part which I thought I will cover up before I get into why do we research and how do we write about it. So I can take a pause here for a few minutes, and if you have any questions or clarification, or if you would like to add into the discussion, I'll be more than happy. Anyone, any have concern or any? Please feel free to unmute yourself, and if you have doubt or clarity, once more clarity.
I think clear, sir, to all.
Okay. No questions?
Anyone have any doubts or queries?
Anyone? Because my professor, one professor always tells me if there are no questions, which entails that either the participants capture in totality or doesn't did not get anything.
Yes.
I believe you all is clear. Yeah.
If anyone have any queries, so you can ask to sir. Romila.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
there is one question.
You have doubt?
No, sir.
There was a question by Mr. Abhishek Gupta. Sir, how do you see the use of terms like Adivasi? Any more? We can take 2-3 more questions and I can reflect upon. Or say, you can even share your research areas, interest, and I can take example from there and discuss, rather than making it so dry.
So relating to that, I have a question as well.
Yes. Please.
Sir, my research topic is on the socio-economic status of our community, that is Pomai Naga community.
Socio-economic status.
Okay. And yes, regarding the literature review, since there is no historical record where the women of my community is particularly mentioned, and even till today, the literature that deals with the women of my community is so limited. So in this kind of situation, what kind of literature review, what types of literature review should I go about?
Very interesting. Any other?
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Sir, as per your opinion, can you throw some light on the current status of traditional knowledge among the tribal communities? Are we losing traditional knowledge among them in this in this era of modernization? Thank you.
Well, I do not have a definite answer to all these questions, but us at academics, I wanted to reflect about the questions. I think there is no harm to discuss about we as an academics to have the reflections. In the sense that to begin with this Mr. Abhishek Gupta's questions on terms like Adivasi, like the concept or the category like Adivasi, indigenous people, or scheduled tribe, or scheduled caste, I think those are all categories. It's how well that category is kind of capturing the kind of the social reality. I think that matters. Say for instance, if we look at the very category scheduled, very category tribe, we inherit that category from British. And there are certain communities who would like to identify themselves more as in the on the context of the Adivasi rather than tribes or the tribals. Or there are certain communities, say for instance in Northeast India, would like to identify themselves more as a tribals rather than Adivasi. So, in against this backdrop, I think it is important for us to keep in mind about the context which we are talking about. The context in tribal situation in Maharashtra would be very different from the context of tribal situations in Northeast or in Assam, or for that matter, in Himachal Pradesh, for that matter. So it's important for us to keep in mind about how do we as a scholar produce some kind of the context-based practice knowledges, and that's where I'm trying to connect to our friend questions on the kind of these indigenous or the traditional knowledge systems. Which what context are we talking about? In the context of globalizations, are we losing our indigenous knowledge systems? In the context of with the development of science and technology, are we losing our indigenous knowledge systems? Or is there a way where there could be a coexistence of different knowledge system, wherein the traditional knowledge also get informed by the development of science and technology? At the same time, with the development of the science and technology also influences or by the traditional knowledge system. So we need to understand this context in the way that the kind of knowledge and the coexistence, and also the way how the inferiority or the superiority context of the knowledge systems is being set up. So we need to keep in mind or reflect upon in the terms in the context of the coexistence of different communities, different knowledge system. How do we in this beautiful country called India brings up this diversity also in terms of the knowledge system? Say for instance, when we discuss about this tribal knowledge system, we often talk about epistemologies, not epistemology. We talk in plural, not in singular, in the sense that there are more than 700 communities in the context of India called are listed under what is called scheduled tribe. And each tribe has different systems. Each tribe, in the sense, has different culture. So we need to keep that in mind in terms of the plurality and also in terms of epistemologies. And talking about in terms of which our friend Romila has asked in terms of socio-economic and the kind of the literature, many a time we will be confronted with this idea that why are we doing research? Okay, no one has written about this, so I'm interested to write about it. That is some sort of the motivation when we start a research paper or when we start our research journey. But then, since no one has written about it, where are we going to get literature? You know, if no one has written about it, where will we find the literature? So, in terms of literature review, it is not necessary that someone has written about the community whom you're studying. Say, for instance, you discuss about the context of the Pumai tribe, Pumai community. I am well aware that there are very less literature in terms of the Pumais, but that doesn't mean that we cannot do a literature review. We can do it as such that what are the kind of scholarships has written about in terms of the socio-economic aspects of other communities, not necessarily which you are talking about, like your community, the community which you are researching. What has people written about, say, for instance, Mao communities, for instance, the Angami tribe, the Tangkhul tribe, or for that matter, even the Maitis, for that matter, like not necessarily related to only your communities which you are researching it. It's important to capture what are the latest debate taking place in terms of the socio-economic aspects of women. For that matter, you will have to look into the literature in terms of the feminist writing as well. You have to look up to the literature, what has people written about it in terms of, say, indigenous people across the globe. What has people written about, say, for instance, the Maori tribes in New Zealand, the Aborigines in Australia, tribes or like the indigenous people in Latin America, indigenous people in North America, indigenous people in terms of, the South Africa. What are the literature, what are the theoretical aspects which people has dwell in terms of, say, socio-economic aspects of women? It's important for you to bring that element into your research, and that is the process of literature review. Many a time when we do a literature review, we often talks about it. Okay, Mr. A, B, C said this and that. A said this, B said this, C said this, or Ziipao says this, Vika said this. That is what is called survey of literature, not literature review. Literature review is something, what has Vikas said? Can I have a conversation with Vikas, what Vikas has written about it? Or what Sapune has written about it? I, as a scholar, can I have a conversation with the author? The moment you brings in that element, that essence, you are discussing what is called the literature review. And here it's important to also understand when we discuss about theoretical framework. What is theoretical framework? In the sense that what are the concepts you are using it in your research area? It's not that we brings in some grand theory and try to apply into our research. But when we talk about theoretical framework, is that in the domain of socio-economic aspects of women, what are the concepts? Can you use it to explain the kind of reality of the community whom you are researching about it? Say, for instance, there is one very interesting concept. There was questions over here from Ganga, and saying they belongs to Buksa tribes, one of the primitive, vulnerable tribal groups of Uttarakhand. I want to know about oral traditions of the tribal groups, in the sense that many a time the tribal history is mostly to do with oral history. And if you ask me, is oral history a way forward to build in the kind of the tribal epistemology? My answer is yes. We can rely on the oral history to build into the what is called the knowledge systems. And oral history, for that matter, it itself is a method to understand the richness of certain communities. And many a time the histories are such that predominantly tribal history is oral in nature. So there was also one question to suggest some books, book suggestions and literature review, research topics, social media impacts on adolescents, sociological study. Please enlighten this topic. See, the kind of topic which you choose to write or you choose to research, you have to be very clear if you are a PhD student or if you are in the initial stage of the PhD students. Am I ready to sacrifice, say, 4 to 5 years on this particular research topic? Question number 1. 2, am I ready to undergo this pain of reading and writing? Of course, many of you, I'm sure you enjoy reading and writing. But for me, sometimes writing is a very painful exercise. But the kind of, joy or the satisfaction you get is when that writing inform the kind of community which you are involved into it. And when you're very clear that my research, my writing is not about power. That I am researching on one community so that I can have more power on that community. No, I'm very clear on why am I researching. My research is not only about promotion from assistant professor to associate professor or from associate professor to a professor. My research is also been inspired by the community whom I studied. As such that my research helps them to inform about the kind of social reality, about the kind of the status, what's happening. If my research can explain the kind of the reality of the Pumai, what's happening, if my research can explain about the small towns or the small urban space in tribal dominated areas, then I am being successful in the sense that I inform my communities, the whom I research, in the sense that, look, this is what it is happening. This is why it is happening this way. So that they are also in a way aware about the circumstances which they are living on. That is the whole idea about research. And if you are very clear on your aspects of your research, why you are doing certain research, then you will have clarity in terms of your PhD research, in terms of the research project, in terms of the consultancy work which you do. I think that has some clarity. And the last part, which I want to deal a little bit, spend few minutes, is in terms of writing up. How do you write up after you have collected your data on tribal society? It's a subject depending on the disciplines which you are in. If you're a sociologist, if you're an anthropologist, you will be encouraged to write what is called thick descriptions, in the sense that when you write, it's as such that someone else reading your work should feel as such that I am being taken to that particular place. That I am feels that I am interacting with those communities. So that is the thick descriptions in terms of sociology or anthropology, what is called the ethnography fieldwork. And when you write up this ethnography fieldwork, is how do you describe that very environment? At the same time, what distinguishes us as an academics and that of a journalist is that journalists, for that matter, are reporting the facts. Here, we are describing at the same time theorizing the very process. At the same time, we are explaining those realities. That's what makes us an academics. So when you are in the positions to write as such that describing in detail, at the same time explain your data, then you are doing a good work, then you are theorizing it. For instance, my research on small tribal towns, say for instance Sanapati town, I was trying to explain or research what's going on in terms of this indigenous urbanization process. Why is it that certain communities, certain people over there are against the township status? What are the processes of establishing a new town, a new village in the periphery of the district headquarters? I was trying to explain that process. What are the governance structure? How do people in Sanapati town govern themselves? On the one hand, it comes under what is called the village structure. On the other hand, there is this autonomous district council which comes in terms of the governance structure. There are layers, but at the same time, there is also the district administration which enforces about the governance structure. So my role as a researcher in the paper which I published in the EPW is in terms of governing tribal towns, trying to understand the governance structure, and at the same time explaining that. And while explaining, I also embed my field work, my data within that paper itself, and try to take my readers to that place. So that is one way of writing up about in terms of after collecting your data, and particularly in terms of the ethical members ethics which you need to take into considerations. So the question which I asked was that in terms, why are we researching? Is it for power, for community, or for the love of knowledge? I think because I'll stop here. If there are other questions I can take.
Sir, if any participant have any questions, so
Yes.
anyone have any questions? Someone have written a question in the chat box, I think. Participants, if possible, then you can unmute yourself and please ask a question direct to sir, if possible.
Yes, so that we can have the interaction.
Yes. Please unmute yourself. Yes. So it will be interactive. If anyone have any queries, and please unmute yourself, then ask to sir.
So will
Ganga
others
have asked.
Yes.
Hello,
I think
sir.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes. My question is not related with how to write an article on tribal, tribal areas or tribal people. Since I'm from a commerce background, so I would like to ask a very general questions. I'm from Arunachal Pradesh. So my question to you is that is opposing industrializations in a tribal area is fair? Because those kind of industrializations can create jobs and infrastructures, and it can bring development. And also you have also mentioned that there were conflict of viewpoints between the two authors. So my question to you is that are we romanticizing industrialization while denying the tribal people from the modern development? So what is your say on this, sir?
Very, very interesting questions. Once again, I don't have an answer to that. I can ask in the kind of the development debate that is taking place in the context of India. And very rightly, you have pointed out, if I were to take the example from Arunachal itself, say, for instance, how many hydropower projects are coming up in the context of India? And very rightly, you have pointed out that there are many aspects which people romanticize. But we as an academics need to go beyond romanticizing hydropower projects. At the same time, there are certain communities who are in support of these hydropower projects. So it's important for us to contextualize certain projects. Important to understand that this industrialization, no doubts about it, come with the creation of the job. But will the benefits accrue to certain communities, or will there be a distributions in terms of those crucial questions we should also reflect upon in terms of industrialization? And of course, in the context of romanticization of tribes, you are right, because there are many aspects which people romanticize. But we as an academics need to go beyond romanticizing and brings in about the principles, in the sense that the kind of the principle that promotes for the progress of the community, tribal communities, or for that matter for the nation at large. We should bring forefront to that very aspect, and be cautious, have a reflections in terms of this development debate. Say, for instance, it was a pre-independent period, the debate between Elvin and that of Professor J.S. Gore, and what does the constitution talks about it. So I think it's important for us to also reflect upon, say, what are the provisions in the constitution of India, like fifth schedule, sixth schedule, particularly when it comes to about the development of in the context of the tribes in India. I'm not very sure, Nang, whether I answered to your question or not, but I have no answer. I was just trying to reflect upon it.
Any other have any questions?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, I'm Sonu Trivedi from Kanpur, UP. Sir, I have a question. Do you see any ideological correlation with tribal communities? Because sometimes we see that they often try to hinder the state-sponsored projects, and it seems that sometimes they kill people. Do you see any political ideological correlation between tribal communities, sir?
Well, that's a very, very difficult question to answer, but I can reflect again in such that when it talks about the development and ideology, there are instances in tribal areas saying that, particularly like in Arunachal and even in Nagaland, they say, please come and build highway in our land. We will not even take compensations. You know, because we do not have highways or we don't have roads. Saying, please, state government, come and help us build the roads, and we will not take any compensation in terms of land. Those
Yeah.
are certain things which also comes of the kind of realities. But if we look at certain realities or certain places, of course, development also being politicized and the kind of oppositions to certain development areas. So one of the
Mm.
very debate is in terms of the hydropower projects. So we
Yeah.
need to also understand about the context, and what is the context? Who are the one leading that, and which are the communities affecting, which are the communities benefiting, which are the kind of the ideologies that infuse on that aspect. We need to, I think, very cautious on that.
Yeah. You are saying, sir, interest plays much role rather than ideology.
That's what I was talking about, context. So say for example, the context in Arunachal, the context in some of the tribal areas is that please build highways, please
Yeah.
build school, please build colleges. We are ready to give our land, type. Those are the
Mm.
instances. And you can also see the opposite of that, saying that we will not allow these kind of things to take place.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you,
as a
sir.
researcher,
Mm.
how do we capture the essence of that? It's important for us. Why is it people that are opposing, or why is it people are supported? So, it is the role of a researcher like you and me to capture and to understand that very process.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So, for the formal vote of thanks, I would like to invite Dr. B. Sapnali Romila. She is a scholar in the Department of History, Manipur University. Over to you, Romila.
Thank you, Sir Vikash, for giving me the opportunity to say the word of thanks for this amazing session. A very good afternoon to everyone. I need not mention my name again. I'm a PhD scholar in the Department of History, Manipur University. My heartfelt gratitude to our respectable Dr. Raile Ziipao for sharing your expertise and insights on research writing in tribes and tribal epistemologies in India. Being a tribal myself, this session means a lot to my research journey, and thank you for clearing the doubts on how to go about with my literature review. And I'm sure this session would benefit all the participants in the research in one way or the other. Once again, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank
It was nice interacting with you all, and I
Thank you,
wish
sir.
you all the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Bye, 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 bye. Thank you.
Swangi madam? Yes, yes. Okay, thank you.